like to first of all draw members' attention to the addendum report, in particular paragraphs 3.1 to 3.5, which relate to this application. I will discuss relevant issues during my presentation. Sorry for the quality of that particular slide this evening. The site is an existing school, and it is bounded on 3 sides, south, to the north and to the west and east, in fact, apart from a small section on the north-east by residential properties. It's a Victorian board school of significant historic merit, and there is an area which is here, which is a wooded area. That's part of the site as well, and I'll talk about that. There are entrances to the site on Gaza Street, on Fawn Street at the moment, and there's also an entrance on Donington Grove. That entrance, although it's there, it's not currently being used and hasn't been used for some time. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing dining hall and the erection of a 2-storey block and new entrance on Charles Street. That particular block would be located approximately in this location here. There would be the demolition of the toilet block, which is just to the south of the main entrance, and that would be replaced by a block for some stores, and there'd also be a provision for 15 staff car parking spaces. These works would effectively increase the capacity of the school from a 1.5 form entry school to a 3 form entry school. In the fullness of time, double the capacity of the site. A large number of objections have been received, and the issues that caused concern for local residents primarily are the impact on the amenity for Sharsted Street, the entrance, the impact on amenity from loss of daylight, sunlight and privacy, transport-related matters, including the impact on use of the school entrance. The entrance on Fawn Street is currently problematic and causes significant disruption, and they're concerned that the increase in capacity would have upon the use of the entrances. Noise from the completed development and during the construction process. Objections also refer to the design and scale of the development proposed, the loss of the wooded area, and we have also recently, as is reported in section 3.2 of the addendum report, had additional responses. This was from solicitors acting on behalf of a resident at Sharsted Street. There was a question as to whether the application has been classed and advertised as a major development. I can confirm it has. We have consulted on the application as a major development, and it has been advertised as such. My understanding is that the confusion was around the fact that the application is classed as a small-scale major development. But it is a major development, and there's no doubt to the consultation period on that. The letter also queried whether alternative site has the consideration of an alternative site has been undertaken as part of this process. This is not material plan consideration because it is a requirement under Schools and Standards Framework Act 1998, which is a separate regulatory regime, as referred to again in the addendum report. There's also been a query about whether any part of the development contains a playing pitch. It does not. It does not comply with any part of the site does not comply with the description of a playing pitch under the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedure Order 2010. So on to the application itself. Officers do not consider there is a concern with the principle of the development the site is in lawful use as a school, and that land use would not change. With respect to the impacts on amenity, and in particular noise and odour, all of the play spaces would be well screened from residential properties, either by existing structures or structures proposed. So, for example, the main play area would be in this location, and that would be screened quite effectively by the new proposed block here and there. And this flank facade will also provide some screening. There is a nursery proposed just to the south here, and there's a nursery play space on that location. However, that would be behind an existing wall, and officers consider the impacts from that particular use would not be unacceptable. There's also been concern raised about the use of the community hall. So on this part of the site, that would be the school hall, and it would also double as a community facility outside of school hours. Condition 10 could readily deal with this. It requires the applicant to submit a community use scheme before its occupation, and through that we would control the type of operation it will be under. Our understanding is that it's not envisaged for noisy parties or birthday celebrations, those type of things, but would be low-key community events. We have also had concern about the impact that noise from the kitchen exhaust system and plants associated with it would have. We have not been supplied with any detailed information on where that plant would be located. However, it is common for these details not to be available at these early development stages, and there is a condition suggested, condition 9, which would deal with not only the noise but also the potential odour from any exhaust system. A new entrance would be located on Sharsted Street, just there where that pointer is, which could understandably has caused some concern for local residents. However, officers feel that restricting the use of that entrance solely for the use of the after-schools club and the community use would alleviate that. It would take that entrance away from the main or the busier pinch points during the school drop-off and pick up. The applicants have submitted assessments of the impact on sunlight and daylight, and this has shown that all relevant windows at 49 Sharsted Street, 26 Braganza Street and 52 Sharsted Street would comply with the building BRE Building Research Establishment guidance for impacts on daylight and sunlight not to be noticeable. Analysis was undertaken on the block opposite, just here, which is at 54 to 72, so further north as well, Sharsted Street. The initial analysis showed that there would be an impact as is referred to in the report. However, a more detailed analysis has also been undertaken, taking out the effect of the overhang that these properties have on the ground floor windows, and that analysis has showed that the effect would be for the visible sky component would be acceptable, but the reduction in the amount of daylight would be between, it's in the addendum report, would be between 0.73 and 0.78. The guidance states that a level of 0.8 is not noticeable. To alleviate, to some degree, the impact on privacy that may occur through the use of the new build classroom on this area, obscure glazing has been proposed. Perhaps the property which is most likely to be affected is number 49 Sharsted Street, just to the south of the kitchen block. and through some negotiations, I mean, this depth here would be 17 metres at a single storey, and the setback would be 2 metres just there. The setback for this first floor, or the second storey, would be 5.5 metres. So we feel that that would still enable a decent outlook from the rear of that property, and as I've already said, sunlight and daylight impacts have been assessed and found to be acceptable. On to transport impact. I'd just like to draw members' attention to an addendum matter. Paragraph 30 in the committee report suggests that 35% of pupils with the transport survey cycle to work. That's incorrect. It's actually 3%, and then the total adds up to 100%. There have been many objections with regards to transport impact, including potential impact from the intensification of the site. Fawn Street to the south, as I said in the introduction, is particularly congested, and there's significant disruption during peak drop-off and pick-up times. There would be, with the complete development, doubling in pupil numbers, and officers feel that it's reasonable to impose a condition on this particular application should members give planning permission for the Fawn Street access not to be used during the main drop-off and pick-up times once the new building was occupied. The school has submitted an ambitious and robust school travel plan, and a significant degree, 59 spaces of parking, cycle parking is proposed. As I referred to, the condition regarding the entrance on Fawn Street would also encourage the school to use the entrance on Donington Grove, which would be opened up, and the restriction of the prohibition of the entrance, use of the entrance during the main pick-up and drop-off time on Fawn Street would we feel result in a benefit for the residents along the street. There would be a significant loss of trees in this totally wooded area. It was an area that was bomb damaged and has not been developed subsequently, and the wood is an unique space that residents understandably value. The development would result in the loss of this wooded area. 20 of the 29 trees that are there would need to be removed. 6 of these trees are of moderate quality and category B trees, while the remaining 14 are of low quality category C trees. This is the assessment of the applicants are horticulturalists, and of low category means that they have low amenity value, and there may be trees that would not survive for beyond 10 years. While the loss of the wooded area would be regrettable, replacement planting is proposed, most notably alongside Charles Street, to provide some kind of softening of that area. It's considered on balance that the loss of that wooded area and trees would be acceptable. The proposed design is of a contemporary nature. And here we can see the Charles Street elevation. And interest would be introduced through the use of soldier brick classes and variation of the fenestration. This level here, this would be opposite the residence on Charles Street, and that height is approximately 6 metres. The area of building above that would slope away from us as we look at the slide here, because that particular line represents the eaves level. It's of a scale and massing that we feel is appropriate for this area, reflecting to some degree the residential nature of development further south. The development would result in increased capacity and for the school increased provision for education, and officers recommend it for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Dinesh. Do members have any questions for the officer? I've got Leo, followed by Nick, Chris, Maria in that order, and then David. That's great, all members. Leo?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question that would be of use to members and I think many residents in the room in relation to 42 Braganza Street, which is the industrial enterprise space. I'm just trying to understand, given the site constraints that bound the proposal that are coming forward, and the fact that this that the proposal, as I've seen in the design and access statement, caters for issues of overlooking and enclosure and daylight, which are incorporated in the scheme, with the potential that that council-owned site might one day be residential use. I was wondering if you'd be able to elaborate a bit more on why that constraint was imposed and subsequently the new development had to be on the west side of the site.
So there are two questions there, Councillor Pollock. First of all, why we have why there's been an assessment of the impact on 42 Braganza Street, and
why it was ruled out as an alternative site to expand the school on.
That's I'm afraid said that's not a material planning consideration. It is my understanding that that particular requirement to consider alternative sites is part of a separate regulatory regime, and it's not something that members can place any weight on for this determination.
Can I just interject a minute? Can I just kindly remind members that they can only pass judgment and deliberate on the application presented to them this evening? Okay, thank you.
After some contextual information.
Did you have a part two to that?
No, it was just a
simple, right,
contextual
okay.
question.
Okay. Yes, non-material. Thank you. Nick?
Just a couple of questions, and I'll go slowly. We're talking about the loss of trees. Where is it conditioned that they are? Where is the replacement of the trees conditioned? If you could point to the condition, that would be really helpful. And don't turn over the page too quickly, because I'm going to go back to the conditions for other things. And I assume we're talking about replacement with like-for-like trees and mature trees where possible, to ensure that we're not got twiglets stuck in the ground. The next bit is the community use. Could you point to the condition that's there which relates to the community use and how and what expectations we will have of the school to limit the nuisance that arises out of that and what measures we can bring into place? And the other thing was about the Font Street and how we prevent the school from actually using Font Street. I wasn't quite clear in the conditions where that might fall, and if it does, can we be quite clear that that is one of the things we wish to reinforce? And I think, the contextual question that was asked previously, is it not, I'm going to shape this into a question. My understanding is, therefore, is my understanding right or wrong, that the Braganza Street site, which people have been looking to, has not been made available because it is designated for other uses by the council, and it's anticipated as part of another scheme. Choose your order.
Thanks. I'll take the last one first, if I may. I'm afraid I'm not aware of the council's aspirations for 42 Braganza Street, but it is not part of the application site, and it is therefore for members to deliberate on the application that's before them. Now, on the loss of trees, or the conditions for trees, can Condition 7 requires details of proposed planting, and that includes a landscape scheme. And it also has wording which would secure replacement of any tree that would die within 5 years of planting. And condition 8 also requires an arboricultural method statement to be submitted, which would protect the existing trees. And you're absolutely right. It would be a nonsense to have the mature trees on site replaced with saplings. And it will, and it's referred to in the report. We will expect semi-mature trees to come forward. The condition on community use is condition number 10, and I would also. So condition number 10 would be the condition by which we would expect the school to provide us with details of how they would envisage or how they would intend to use the community facility, and that would allow us then to assess the impact of that facility to make sure that it would not be unreasonable. There is a condition recommended prohibiting the use of the entrance on Charles Street after 9 o'clock, so that in and of itself would limit the time of use. It's in the addendum report. It's at 3.5.
3.5?
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. So it's definitely there, and that will be included in the report when it's done.
If planning permission is granted,
Yep.
yes it would. And that would also allow officers in the council to assess the impacts before 9 o'clock. And as I referred to, unless there is suitable sound insulation, we would expect a use that would generate lots of noise to be undertaken, and we would expect to see factors such as the intensification of this included as well.
You've got a supplementary, have you? Yes.
He's just reminded me.
Yeah, go ahead, because I'm going to cheekily get a question in as well on a point that he's already raised. So, yes.
It's the other. You mentioned noise, and that goes back to the plant and the kitchen. Where's that in the conditions, please? And how enforceable is it?
It's condition number 9 in the development, in the member pack, and so in that we would be asking for details of sound attenuation. There's a level specified of 30 dB, 1 metre from the nearest, from nearby noise sensitive premises. And it also requires details of ventilation, which we would expect to see methods of odor control, flue height, etc. to be submitted.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Can I just picking up a point that Nick has raised, back to condition number 7 on the trees. Do we know how many trees are going to be replanted or planted? And are we able to get an indication on the number of trees?
No, I'm afraid, Chair, we don't have that information at the moment. The detailed replacement planting hasn't been worked out, which is quite commonly the case where there would be some loss of trees, and the specification would be submitted under condition number 7.
Because we're sort of losing 20, aren't we, in accordance to. So what would be the expectation in terms of replacing trees? Because the applicants, from my understanding, are going to make an attempt to replace trees because they recognise the loss of the wooded area. So what would be our expectation in terms of replacement? And how would that be worked out if you don't know at this stage?
There is an assessment method. It's called the CAVAT. I'm terribly sorry about it. I don't know what the acronym stands for. It's a technical assessment that looks into the age of the trees, the quality of the specimen, how rare it may be, and the impact, for example, on screening and the benefits in regards to amenity. And it's a standard procedure when assessing the value of trees. So we would at the very least look for the value of the trees according to that procedure to be provided with any new landscaping plan, and ideally for that to be exceeded.
Thank you. And then just going back to condition number 10 and the community use scheme. Am I right in saying that residents will be consulted on that, and then an agreement in consultation with residents based on their findings will be applied? Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's very much the intention for the community use scheme to be consulted on with local residents.
Thank you. Can I invite Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dipesh. I just wanted to ask you, you talked about there was a reduction of, you did some light studies and there was a reduction of 0.8. And now, is that normal? Is that acceptable? And following that is also, I was quite concerned about that in Fawn Street. If you look at the traffic, it's quite heavy traffic. Now we're talking about increasing the school from 1.5 to almost double that. And so the impact of traffic is going to be quite severe. Now, how are you going to mitigate that and what type of conditions? And lastly, you talked about there's going to be 15 car parking spaces, now which obviously is encouraging more cars into the area. And I don't know if you have considered that, is maybe using bikes, for example, to mitigate that.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. If I may, I will take the Fawn Street question first, because I don't believe I answered your question, Councillor Dozan, on that particular matter. The Fawn Street entrance, as you correctly identified, is very busy. I haven't been there while it's during school time, but I have some pictures circulated by residents, and my colleague from our transport planning team has been there and informed you that it is very busy. So there is certainly pinch points, and there's an issue there at the moment. We're hoping that through this application, that particular problem could be alleviated. So at the moment, there's no control over the Fawn Street entrance, but through planning, through the intensification of the site, we could impose a condition prohibiting the use of that particular entrance because of the additional capacity that the school would have. But that condition would only become engaged once the new building would be occupied, and it is condition, I should have found it before now, thank you. Condition 17 on page 31. Now, with respect to the sunlight and daylight impacts, the 0.8 is the ratio through which the BRE guidance states that there would be no noticeable impact or reduction on daylight. There were some properties on Sharsted Street. They were 54 to 72, which had, in the initial assessment, shown a reduction of between 0.62 to 0.78. Now, that was a significant contributor to that reduction is the overhang that there is above the ground floor windows that were assessed. The guidance allows for more nuanced assessment to be undertaken, taking out the impact of that particular overhang. And when that was undertaken, the reductions were much smaller. and resulting levels were, as in the addendum, 0.73 to 0.78, very close to the 0.8 ratio in the guidance. Notwithstanding that, we do feel that the site and the development, the main building would be 12 metres across Front Street, which is the recommended distance in the Council's residential design standards for an impact to be acceptable. And it would also effectively reflect the nature and the position of dwellings further to the south. So, taking all of those matters into account, we feel the impact on daylight on those particular properties is acceptable. There was a question also on the parking spaces, and I would, if I may, hand over to Mr. Loveday for that.
So just to correct you, there's actually only 8 car parking spaces. Existing is 3, and there's an increase of 5. So while it does double, more than double the existing level of car parking, 5 extra vehicles on the highway wouldn't have a perceived impact on the surrounding operation.
Can I just ask you, Christian, at this point, what was the basis in terms of your findings and research on the additional use of the surrounding roads in terms of gaining access to the school? Or, yeah, in the proposals and the application. So, I think from my understanding, Vaughan Street, the current means by accessing the school that was heavily congested. Am I correct in stating that?
Yes, we had some serious concerns with the operation of Vaughan Street and its current capacity. We were obviously even more concerned about the doubling of the effective doubling of the size of the school. However, by putting this condition on the operation, the times of usage of the Vaughan Street access, effectively removing Vaughan Street as an access during the busiest periods, school drop-off and collection times, it reduces nulls the attraction of Vaughan Street at those times when the operation is at its highest and dissipates it through the other accesses around the site.
So, in other words, relieving the burden from that main initial entrance access point.
Donington has more parking and is a wider road and can cope with that level of vehicle traffic as opposed to Vaughan Street.
Spreading the load, as it were. Thank you. Maria?
Thank you, Chair. Although some of the questions have already been answered, or partly answered, there still remain a couple of things that I would like to ask. First of all, one of the most affected properties is supposed to be property number 49, which is quite close. If we can have a look on the previous slide, please. That one? No. It's in the main one that we were looking at. That's it, yeah. So property 49 is very, very close to the building, therefore it will be the most affected property. Can you please let me know what will be the distance between the wall of the building of the school and the property number 49?
Sure. The distance between the distance between the boundary of 49 and the ground floor part of the building would be 2 metres, and the distance between the boundary and the first floor, the second story element, would be 5.5 metres.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, but what will it be the allowed distance guidance, please?
Sorry, I'm not
The
sure.
guidance for distance, what will it be? We must have a guidance of distance. So we have at the moment 2-point meters, but I would like to know what is the guidance.
We don't have any guidance in the, I think, in the residential design standards, SPD, that may be the document you're referring to. We don't have any guidance in there with respect to the distance on flank elevations. We do have guidance on the distance between front elevations across the street and rear elevations. But that guidance is there to prevent, amongst other things, impact on privacy, and quite often on flank elevations. There are very rarely windows on flank elevations, so a closer form of development is normally allowable, as you'd see in many suburban areas and residential areas.
And there are no windows that they are going to be interfered on this property? No?
No, there are no windows proposed on the flank elevation of that.
The next question, although we are going to, you know, we had answered mostly the question about the replacement of trees, but it is a very beautiful wild garden. Is that going to disappear altogether? That is part of the wooden area that is going to disappear? Or the supplement is this beautiful wild garden that the children and neighbours enjoy very much. Is that going to also disappear?
Yes, that's the element that would be lost and replaced by the building. I'm not sure that there is direct access of that area for members of the public, and I'm not sure how intensely the area is used by the school at the moment. The applicant can, of course, answer that, but that area would certainly be lost. But we do feel on balance with the benefits of the scheme and the benefits to the community with the additional capacity of the school, in addition to the replacement planting that would come forward, we feel is acceptable.
Thank you. But it would be nice, I think, to replace not only the trees, life by life, but also to have a similar wooden area like this one, because I think it is quite pretty, and for the enjoyment of children, it would be nice to have something similar to that.
The challenge with this site, Councillor, is quite a constrained size, so any area given over to more extensive planting would then affect the play space. But again, this is probably something that the applicant can probably talk about when they present.
Okay, thank you. And finally, although she's been almost answered, on the community user scheme, the thing that concerns me is in case the hall for hire at weekends and evenings, that is also going to be part of the consultation?
It would, so that we would expect to see details of the types of uses that it would be put to, the hours of use that it would entail, and management of that operation as well.
Because obviously that will be of concern to the adjacent residents.
Absolutely, and understandably as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. David?
You'll be pleased to know, Chair, that all my questions have been asked and answered.
You've got your wonderful colleagues to thank for that. Thank you, David. Does anyone wish to... Chris, have you got... Oh,
Thank you, Chair. Just very quick, because I think I am quite concerned with the fact that we are already putting so much pressure on residents in terms of increasing, doubling the school size. And then at the weekend, so there's no respite for the residents at all, and because of the usage of this hall. And I'm quite concerned that I think we need to seriously think how much the hall is going to be used at weekends, because we can't have people constantly coming and disturbing the residents.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Gonda. This is why that particular conditions there is for the school to tell the local authority and then for us to consult with the residents on the use, including the hours of use, and that would not only be during school times but also outside of those times.
thank you. Do members have any other questions to present to the planning officer? No? Thank you. Not at this juncture. Thank you very much. Therefore, can I invite anyone, is there anyone here to speak in objection to... all right, could you come forward and introduce yourselves, please? introduce yourself first of all, and then I'll remind you at this point, you've got 3 minutes, so you need to I hope you've decided who's going to speak or how you're going to divvy that time up between you, but when you've got 60 seconds, 1 minute left, if you choose to use up your the full duration of that period of time, I will inform you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maggie Woods and I'm a resident.
My name is Geraldine Vummer, I'm a resident of Shaftesbury Street.
I'm David Doyle and I'm a resident of Shaftesbury Street. We support a central school expansion, however the council proposes a legally flawed development. The report prepared by officers before you is seriously misleading. Nearly 50 residents have raised objections to the negative impacts of this proposal, which will include traffic congestion, destruction of the 60-year-old and wild garden, an entrance on Shaftesbury Street repeating the same problems as Fawn Street, inappropriate proximity and height of a new building, and kitchen plant and a community hall too close to residents' homes. Despite extensive meetings and discussions at residents' request across the council, the fundamental issues have still not been addressed. The application is caught by the criteria for a major application under SAVE Policy 3.3. It is classified as small-scale development for reasons unknown and officers denied. Policy 3.3 states major applications must have a sustainability assessment that meets the SPD. That's Policy 3.3. This states that environmental, social and economic impacts are assessed through a sustainability assessment and balanced to find the most sustainable option for the development. This was not carried out. Regardless of misclassification, the adopted SPD checklist must be followed, requiring as a minimum that the proposal is on brownfield land, and Policy 3.3 demands alternative site analysis. The council as applicant has adjacent brownfield land available and has previously proposed that same brownfield land for school expansion. It now chooses to build on school playing field land instead. The Wild Garden, which is established in the school curriculum and falls under the School Standards and Framework Act that defines the playing field far wider than the Planning Act. A decision to destroy the Wild Garden would be irrational when alternatives exist. The NPPF, London Plan and SAVE policies clearly prioritise brownfield land development. The council owns by registered titles both the school and the adjacent workshops, which are intermingled, as officers well know. The officer report asserts that the land cannot be developed for the school as it does not belong to the school. This is seriously misleading as no land belongs to the school. This is all council-owned land. There are other options which still enable the school to expand but significantly reduce the blight on neighbouring residents. However, the officers have simply refused to engage with the council's own policy and what planning law requires. It is said the workshop site could not meet September 2016 requirements, yet public cabinet reports detail the 2016 timetable for separate development of this site to address shortfall in central government funding. The council, as applicant, has a clear high duty of transparency and probity given it is allowed to decide to grant itself planning permission, but officers have artificially limited the development envelope, a mantra you could say to ensure best financial outcome next door, but profit is irrelevant to good design and good planning. The entire officer report barely mentions the alternative site that is brownfield land and gives no credible, proper reason as to why this land was not considered. Finally, the handful of conditions in the report which relate to specific objections merely tweak the existing plans. They are wholly unsatisfactory and we urge strong debate on these. We request the committee defer this application to enable new designs to be prepared which address the issues we've repeatedly and consistently raised. Only this option will ensure the best long-term outcome for both school and residents.
Okay. Well done, you just got in the 3 minutes. Right, there are a number of issues that you raised, and I'm just going to invite the officers to pick up on those points, on the legal aspects of your presentation, and then I'll invite members. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. The point about alternative sites needing to be considered was discussed earlier by the presenting officer. The point about alternative sites needing to be considered is that this is a requirement under the education legislation that's been referred to. It's not a planning requirement. Part of the education legislation requirement is also to consider whether playing fields are being affected, and that's not the case here. Nevertheless, when the applicants come to the table, they may be able to give more information on the alternative site assessment that I understand has been undertaken, but the important point here, members, is that it is not a planning requirement under the planning legislation to consider alternative sites with this application. Playing fields, as set out by the planning legislation, as defined by the planning legislation, are not affected here at this site. This is not the development site in question this evening, does not constitute a playing field, looking at the definitions set down by planning legislation. Therefore, there are no additional consultation requirements required, and there is not a requirement under the planning legislation to consider alternative sites. As is the case with all planning applications, they have to be considered on their merits based on what is within the red line. And that is what officers have done, so the application has been properly considered on its merits and having proper regard to the impact on the neighbouring area. And I would also come to the point about considering whether the development is sustainable, and that requires careful consideration of economic, environmental and social impacts, and that has been carefully considered as part of the assessment, as it is required under the MPPF as well. All those three strands, economic, environmental and social, have all been carefully considered as part of the assessment and as part of the report that's in front of you this evening. The other point, as I've just been reminded, was about major development, and as again was confirmed by the presenting officer, this application, because it proposes more than 1,000 square metres of floor space, new floor space, is a major development in planning terms. It has been considered as a major development by officers, and it has been publicised as such. So just to be absolutely clear for the record, it is a major development, and it has been considered as such. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bob. Are you able to comment, Mr Doyle made references to brownfield land. Are you able to sort of comment on that at all? On the use of brownfield land? Just for clarification.
Brownfield land is land which has been previously developed. The site in question has been previously developed. It's understood that the site, whilst for 60, 70 years since the war, may have been largely undeveloped because of bomb damage. Prior to that, it's understood that the site was developed. My understanding is it was a continuation of Shaftesbury Street, of the residential terraces that exist further to the south. So the site has been previously developed. The other important point to note, members, is that the site does not enjoy any designation protecting the land from development. It's not metropolitan land, it's not borough open land, etc. So it's not protected from development.
Thank you. Nick, you indicated that you'd like to ask a question. Go ahead. Thank you, Chris.
I want to ask a question in a minute.
Right, so Chris.
Thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation. I just wanted to put a couple of things that you talked about. You talked about there were 50 residents who made objections. Now, out of how many do you think who live within the vicinity of development? How many do you think there are residents in terms of proportion?
Proportion in terms of?
In terms of, 50 residents, are they 100 residents, 200 residents?
Oh, of the residents in the area?
Yeah, in terms of the responses.
Well, the consultees were covering half of Shaftesbury Street, the whole of Vaughan Street. So I think there's some numbers in the back of the planning officer's report in terms of the number of consultees. I would suggest there's probably, nearly half of the people who were consulted have responded, if not more than half of them have responded, and the absolute vast majority of them we know are negative because people can see the huge impact it's going to have on their amenity, which is unnecessary. I do counter the point that the officer has made regarding the classification of this scheme. It's a fundamental flaw This application as per the website still says other small-scale developments. I would like anyone to point to me to anything in the documentation being produced that says this is a major application. I would also like to say that on the checklist that the council has, there is a very, very clear distinction between what is, and this is from the council website, a major application and a minor small-scale applications. So there's two distinct checklists. Now the checklist is very, very clear for a major application that a sustainability and energy statement is required. This is as per policy 3.3. It is not required for a minor application or other small-scale application. So the simple fact that we're still coming back to is that the council has misclassified this scheme. It should not have been validated in the first place because it was not, it did not have the correct items as per the checklist, which is required. So this is laid down in council own policy. They publish the SPD, which has to be followed for the application. And in there, there's a checklist item that specifies as amendment that for a major application, the development must be on brownfield land. And the council has ownership. And I would also say in the checklist that there is for the application help. This is on the Southwark website again. It states here quite clearly. You have the area that's detailed in red, that's lined in red. It says here, a blue line must be drawn on the plan around any other land owned by the applicant, close to or adjoining the application site. And if councillors would like to look, committee members would like to look at the actual legend here, there is a blue section here for Southwark ownership. You will note that the Organza Street, the Kennington Workshop site, is not detailed on there. Now we have to ask the question why that is. Why is it not detailed on this plan? It is detailed as being on here. I cast again at the back here, there's another reference to it. Further on in this document, the area contained within the boundary of the site to which the application relates will normally be shown edged in red on the plan, while other land in the same ownership but not being developed is normally identified separately with a blue line. We come back to the whole argument around the actual ownership of this site. The details have been given in the report that says it is not available for development in time. We know that the leases on the Kennington Workshop sites are in actual have been reduced from 6 months down to 3 months, and we've heard this from people who lease these units. And now we have the actual cabinet. This went to cabinet at the end of January and came from Mark Williams. And there is a timescale in here for development of this site, quite clearly, saying that this site is among those that could be developed in the September 2016 timeframe. And yet we have to ask the question, if it is publicised quite clearly in here that this is a development to reduce the actual deficit from central government funding, why has the council misclassified their own application so they don't have to do a sustainability assessment, so they don't have to consider the brownfield land? Why is this land being kept separately for financial gain? That is something that could be read into this.
Well, that's actually quite a loaded question and comment, but I will re-invite the officers to clarify at a later point in this meeting. Can I just invite Nick to present the question? Nick.
Yeah, I certainly do, and you have given us quite a lengthy description of where we may or may not be flawed, and we will obviously check that. And your familiarity with planning law seems to be fairly extensive. That the first bit would be is that we need to be looking at. Oh, thanks.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the first part is that we should be looking at the application that's in front of us, not the one that we wish we had, and we can quite reasonably consider that, and whether the land is in our ownership or not, we can, or anyone can apply for putting in a planning application. There is also another stage that this is only as you would be aware, I'm sure, this is a recommendation to approve, and if something material occurs between now, the decision taking place and the approval being signed, something that is a material planning consideration, then that would actually bring things to a halt. You also have obviously the issue around your right to bring a judicial review. However, there are some things, if we were to consider this on face value, on the advice on the officers, which we will interrogate later, and on the application, as to why they believe it to be the particular, the application is categorised as it is. There are some of the issues which you talked about in terms of the amenity, which were related to in the, which I referred to very specifically, in terms of protecting as far as we can with the application in front of us, the amenity in terms of the community use of the school, the traffic in Charleston, the traffic in Fawn Street, and the noise and any other nuisance that may occur as a consequence of the kitchen operation. The first question I have is, are you satisfied with those? And the second question is, I do understand that there has been some consultation with you and there has been movement made by the school to accommodate some of your concerns. Is this true or not? So the first one is protection of the amenity through those conditions, and are you satisfied with those? Should we move forward? And the second one is a comment about whether you've been talked to or consulted with, and whether there's been any shift. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take them one at a time. In terms of the conditions which are meant to maintain or protect amenity as such, we do find these are actually, yes, seriously flawed. The condition 10 regarding the actual community use. So this is a major concern for us because, we look at it and the school has basically said that they would only use the entrance as an exit for after school use. I noticed from the addendum that it's now been detailed that there's actually a very, very open period there, and it's not actually detailed whether or not it's an entrance or an exit only in terms of the addendum report. So there's an amended condition there regarding the opening times for the Shaftesbury Street entrance. So I think that's one question I'd like someone to take up at a later time with the school, because we have been assured previously that it would be used as an exit only. In terms of the...
That's exit, sorry, exit for the after school club.
For the after school club, right. But it looks like there's, from the original report, it's actually been changed to having a much wider window of opportunity for use that could be used for entrance and exit. We obviously had a real concern around that because the number of children in the after school club at the moment is 66, and the travel plan indicates, the details indicate that around a quarter of those children are transported by car. Now, with the actual increase in the number of pupils that are expected at the school, it would be reasonable to assume that the number of children at the after school club would therefore increase as well. The travel plan over time has shown an increase in car use completely over, since 2009. If you look at the travel plan, it indicates an increase, I think it's from 11% in 2009 to, I think it was 14%, it's up to 19%, I think it was last year. Yeah. Or thereabouts. But there's a steady increase in car use that is not being addressed anywhere. I mean, we talk about a robust travel plan. There's been nothing really that has actually reduced the use of the car, and we are concerned about the use of the entrance. We live in a smaller cul-de-sac. It's actually narrower than Fawn Street is in terms of the traffic that would be on there. We've had various meetings. We've met with Mark Williams and Victoria Mills. We've met with the project manager. We've met with Bruce Cochran, and there's various things that have been mentioned in terms of putting signs up to actually restrict traffic, or basically deferring control of traffic to highways. This isn't a planning issue. Well, you have to consider these kind of things. The details that they have, for example, for the restriction on Fawn Street use, it's been left to the school to actually close off Fawn Street. There's no condition that we see for reopening Doddington Grove. This has been something that the school has been completely against. But reopening Doddington Grove would immediately alleviate the problems which are seen on Fawn Street. When it's been detailed in the officer's report that says that the school will come forward with a, I don't agree with this and wish to, look at this again in a few months' time, etc., if they have a plan. Well, the school have looked at this previously. We've got the consultation minutes, sorry. If I just refer to the document at the moment, sorry. It's a big term. Yeah. So it's from when we did the consultation minutes. Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but I think Doddington Street is being opened up, and that's one of the things that we're talking through.
It's not a condition. It's been mentioned as a
Oh, well, we can
proposal.
sort that out.
It is continually mentioned as a proposal. We know the school is against this and wishes to really continue to use Fawn Street. In terms of the traffic management, here we go. This is a line from the consultation minutes. This was the actual Southwark, again, consultation that was done with the school. You don't have a copy of this, unfortunately, but I'm going to detail here, if I may. This is the response that was given by the school to the question about the issues that were seen on Fawn Street. The school has the same concerns and has done for 15 years. Very few parents and carers drive right down Fawn Street. Those that do often park in the middle of the street, blocking residents from leaving or blocking each other in. Arguments often ensue and they reverse their cars down Fawn Street at some speed. We have tried to combat this by speaking to parents and carers, engaging local councillors, writing to them, reporting to concerns to the police, but nothing has succeeded in having a long-term impact. And this, you've probably already seen, is the result that you see in Fawn Street.
Sorry, can I just ask this?
Yeah.
I mean, is that currently conditioned? Do you know?
That we can take action, enforcement action.
There's no condition, well, there's a condition to close Fawn Street, but essentially there is no controls on traffic going down Fawn Street. There's been mention about putting teachers out and other people to turn people away. Now, that doesn't sound like, that sounds to me more like obstructing the highway than actually imposing anything from a meaningful perspective that actually achieves some benefit. I mean, alternative entrances would be possible.
But I'm terribly sorry. I mean, I am going to ask a question. Do you share my reading of condition 17, which says that Fawn Street is going to be shut as a consequence of the overtures that were made by those people following having seen that photograph, and it is now being conditioned and those conditions can be enforced? Do you share my understanding of the report?
Yeah, I share the understanding that Fawn Street entrance will be closed off. It's completely closed off, in fact, for any pupils to even use it as a pedestrian entrance. It is not regarding car use. So this is a complete closure of a pedestrian entrance to the school. The actual pedestrian use does not cause any impact on Fawn Street. It is the problem is that the people driving down Fawn Street to drop their children off.
I'm now being rather confused. Why would people drive down Fawn Street if they can't drop their kids off there when they can drop them off in Doddington Street and just see them into the gate? Or am I being dense on this?
Because the gate is shut.
Which one?
Doddington Grove.
Doddington Grove.
There is a proposal, it's been detailed even in the transport
It's
assessment.
proposed to reopen the school gate at Doddington Grove, which would ease pressure on Gaza Street.
This is not secured by condition.
Yeah, well, we just said we'd do that.
Well, once again, later on in the meeting we can see clarification on that from the Transport Traffic Department. Are there any other questions, Chris, to the objectors?
Yeah, Jeff, I was just going to ask you a question about the garden. Do I understand correctly that it's not accessible to the public? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the actual, you can see, I don't know if you've got it on other diagrams here, but essentially you have a perimeter here, which is a high fence that prevents people getting into the actual there as such. But it's highly visible, so it runs for 20-25 metres down this aspect here, and can be seen obviously by people here, and also from my own property, 49 Shaftesbury Street, you can see the wild garden at the rear of my property, for example. So you've got all those established trees at the back of the Shaftesbury Street, the line of the terrace, which continues obviously in a terrace line, which is going to be blocked by the new building when it is brought in. It's going to essentially bisect the current traditional row of terraces that we have. As you can see on the screen there, it goes in a 90-degree direction to the other way, but you don't get on the terraces around this area.
Do you kind I just ask a very final question if there are no others from members? In principle, do you object to the expansion of the school given that the spaces are required?
Absolutely not. I mean, we do not object one little bit to the actual expansion required for pupils. As has been stated many times as we've been on to planning committee here, the population is expanding, especially in Southwark, and school places are needed. There is no one among any of the objectors who state that they're against school expansion. It is just the manner in which it is being done. The expansion for this school, remember, is only required from September 2016. That is when the actual expansion of the school comes in from 1.5 forms of entry to 3 forms of entry. That will result in another 30 pupils coming on next year. The need for a large building of this scale, which is not on brownfield land, has not been proven at all. Expansion is going to be carrying on from this school until 2021 in terms of intake of pupils. There is plenty of time to consider other options which do not negatively impact on residents to the same scale as what they do currently. That is our only objection. We do not object to school numbers increase.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your time. You can leave the table and we'll invite the applicant. Is the applicant or agent? Thank you. And as before, if you could kindly introduce yourselves, and once you've done so, we'll ask you to present. And once again, you've got 3 minutes. You can take the full 3 minutes. With a minute to go, the clerk will notify me and I will indicate. Could you introduce yourselves, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bruce Godfrey, Head of Regeneration.
Claire Eastwood, Deputy Head of Keyworth Primary, here on behalf of Susie Whitton, the head teacher.
And Carol Lees from the Architect.
Thank you. You may start.
Thank you, Chair. As members will realise, this is part of the Council's plan to add meet the urgent need for school places. These school places are needed by September 16, and that's the target date for this project. And the area that we're providing places is one of the fastest growing areas of the borough, so these places are definitely urgently needed, and certainly by September 16.
Okay. So Keyworth has obviously been on the site for a very long time. We were asked to provide extra classrooms and a hall for sports and for dining on that site, and also to upgrade the existing word school. We were keen to improve and kind of maximise how the school used the site. At the moment, there's an area of land which they find it very hard to manage. There's no free flow for the children. They have to be accompanied there, which is the kind of forest area, and the wash garden, and the dining area. So that area of land for the school is very underutilised, I'd say. So by placing the building to the edge of the site, what we've been able to do is to create a kind of we've been able to repair the urban green, which was obviously it was kind of bomb damage in the war, and also we've been able to open up the play space for all the schools. So how we've done this, we've looked at a kind of massing of the new building, which we have undergone extensive consultation with the community and the neighbours, which has helped in terms of the height, in terms of this, and we've modelled it in the roof pitches, and we really kind of tried to take on board their concerns for that. We've got the kind of the brand new kind of hall building, which is 2 heights. Then we've got the kind of double height classroom block, and with the early years on the ground floor and the older years above that. I guess what we feel is what we've done is provided a high quality scheme, which has created a kind of a civic response for a school, and it's providing fantastic teaching spaces which will support the kind of brilliant learning which is already happening at Keyworth School. We are an outstanding school and have been since 2011. We've actually been 2 form for the last 3 years. We provide stimulating and broad curriculum. We are aware of the high demand for school places in the borough, and our reception class of 60, which starts in 2015, is full, and we actually have nursery children who attend us who haven't got space for the next academic year.
We do provide wraparound care for our pupils from 8 AM with Breakfast Club for those parents and carers who are at work, and then we also have the After School Club, which our neighbouring school, Crampton, also have their children come to us for that as well. Our traffic survey for
30 seconds left.
our traffic survey for Fort Street has established 25 cars that come in regularly. The rest of our children do come by pedestrian, and we currently do have a lot more staff parking spaces on site. We actually have 23 currently, so that will be reduced quite significantly with the new build. And we are looking forward to providing children with opportunities and experience that we have to offer for so many already, and we have very dedicated staff who are looking forward to providing inspiring education for an expanding school.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions? I've got Nick, followed by Leo, Chris, in that order at the moment. Nick?
Yep, one for Bruce. There are a number of comments about the nature of the application, that it fell out with the planning classification. Is there any comment you would like to make about that? There's another one about the consultation and how you've responded to any response from the residents, particularly opening up or the use of Donington as an entrance, and you happy for that to be conditioned. The use of Sharsted Street as an exit for the After School Club, and whether that might be used as an entrance for the After School Club, and any comments that you may have about what the objector made. There was one other question, I suspect it's for the deputy head teacher, whose name regrettably I've forgotten already. Claire. You've seen the picture that's been bandied around about the cars being parked up there. Is that, in your view, is that a common occurrence? And would the opening up of Donington Street go some way to relieve that, particularly as we're conditioning no cars there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, just to clear up this issue of the timing of the development, school places and Braganza Street. The school places are needed in September 16. As the head has said, we are already admitting it to it. The school is oversubscribed. There's an urgent need for the council to provide these spaces, otherwise children will be out of school. The Braganza Street development is part of a wider potential regeneration plan for the council. The report that the objector referred to, which was the report that went to Cabinet in January, gave an indicative programme which suggested that work could start in 16 on some sites. And the redevelopment of the Kennington Enterprise area is a whole different development which will be subject to a very careful and considered consultation. This application is just about the ability of this site to accommodate an expansion from 1.5 to 3 FE, which is what the scheme achieves. The classroom block is designed to provide the additional classrooms that are needed to take the school all the way through as it expands to 3 FE. But it will clearly admit children on a yearly basis, so it will gradually grow, which I think is a very important part of enforcing the travel plan. The second question was in relation to
Donington, is it Donington?
The consultation with the residents,
yes,
in terms of what shifts the school have made in their response, particularly the opening up of Donington Road.
There's been several meetings with the residents, a couple of consultation meetings, and also a meeting I've attended recently in which we went into much more detail in terms of the current objections. A number of concessions have been made. The first concession was to ensure that the principle was that traffic did not go up Charter Street and did not go up Ford Street. We started off with Charter Street, and then I took another look at Ford Street and also agreed, I think, with many people that it shouldn't be an entrance which vehicles can use. It clearly isn't appropriate. It could be used for pedestrians but not for vehicles. So we are quite happy with the condition on Charter Street. I'm also quite happy with the condition of Ford Street as a means of enforcing the no vehicles. That will be in the school travel plan, and the school will also talk about their proposals to ensure that that would be enforced if the application is agreed. So a couple of concessions. First of all, that the entrance for the after-school club would only be for pickups in the evening. So other entrances would be used because the kids will already be on site, but it will only be so that parents can actually pick up in person after the end of the after-school club. And to do that, they will not be allowed to drive up Charter Street. They will have to park further away, and that is quite common in many London schools. Many London schools are enforcing this requirement for parents to park further away from schools, particularly in the light of the increasing numbers of school places that all London boroughs are being asked to provide. In terms of Fulton Street, the applicant accepts that condition as clearly being necessary and a means of ensuring that cars do not use that road. I think the applicant would like to, or the school would like to evidence that they can actually enforce that. And the head and others will talk about how they intend to achieve that, so it does become a reality. It isn't just something which we would like to do, it's actually achieved regardless of this development. And the final question? Covered more.
Just got Donington Grove, that's for the 10% edge.
Yes, so Donington Grove will be opened as part of this development. It was suggested to me by a number of people, including some councillors, and it's our intention as part of these works to ensure that that entrance is opened up. Clearly, with the wider Donington Grove, it also provides the means for cars to park more easily, although the principle in the travel plan is not to drive to school, but to walk to school, use scooters, to use the tube, etc.
Right, thank you. I've got Leo, who indicated.
Mine's been answered.
You've been, yeah, happy? Right, followed by Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I think, is that Carol?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, you did talk that, you consulted the residents in terms of when you were designing this, and which is quite interesting. I think, we had Deb clearly saying that this size of the building that's being proposed is too large. I mean, particularly when we talk about the intake in 2016. Now, do you think it's actually necessary at the moment to have this large building?
This building has been designed to build in 1999, which sets out the school standards for area in terms of how big classrooms are. So it's on area. It's certainly not over because I wouldn't be allowed to spend that money. And it's needed. It is what's needed for the education system for entry. And it's also well within. I mean, I should say that in terms of the play space, under BB99, they're looking at 4,180 square metres of play space. Now we're providing 4,600. So actually, which is great news, because quite often inner cities, and I'm talking about inner city schools as well, which are often quite constrained. So to hit a play area set out by those standards is very good for 3-4 entry. So it's not, I would say, it's oversized at all.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Now, I mean, from your consultation with the residents, did they make any suggestion that you incorporated into the design of this building?
Yes, they did. Initially, our building sat further towards on Charlotte Street. We were further to our block at the end, which has got the older years, so the kind of north of that. That was 1.5 metres to the left, so it was closer to Charleston, to the property across the road in Charlotte Street. And also, it had a flat roof on the second floor, on the first floor. And what we did is we changed, we shifted it back. So we're kind of over 12 and a bit metres between the properties now. And we shifted because it was a flat roof, we changed that to an angled roof, and we changed the angle quite significantly. So in terms of sunlight, daylight, and actually it's a slight, I think, in this kind of second report that you were talking about, I think it's...
The addendum?
Yeah, the addendum. It's actually kind of better than you've said. So the 0.78 and all those ones that are slightly under the 0.8 were actually when the eaves was taken into account. When we take the eaves away, they're significantly better. So what was proven by that report was actually that it's kind of a ratio to do with that eaves that made it significantly worse, even though we changed the angle. And it still was the design of that building, which is kind of slanting the angle. So even within the realms of acceptable, it's still under, it's 0.7. There's 7 windows out of 32 windows on that space. So actually, and our consultant tells us that that's actually okay in terms of the early guidance.
Can I just add, in terms of other changes that were made to the scheme, the windows as well, with potential for overlooking, and that's been addressed. I think that's in the body of the report. We also most recently looked at the entrance in terms of the kitchen deliveries and the storage of the bins. Those were moved, and we've also undertook to deal with the issue of the extract to ensure that there's no possible risk of noise or nuisance to number 49.
I've got a very quick question before I invite Councillor Hubbard, David, and then a supplementary by Nick. Claire, can you just tell me, you know, you've heard this evening, residents have real concerns about, from their perspective, a real increase with a three-form entry and the higher number of students, pupils that hope to admit to the school under these proposals. The level of traffic, demand of traffic, and we can, you know, seek clarification on projections of use of traffic from the officers later on in the meeting. But could you just say a little bit and comment about the sort of work that you're doing in terms of changing the culture and use of vehicles and encouraging parents to walk, and indeed the pupils, your students, young people, to walk to school. How much work have you done in encouraging your young people to do that, your students to do that? And how do you propose to go about it? Should, you know, this application be granted in terms of alleviating those fears, very real fears that local residents currently have?
Well, we have bikeability and scooter training for our pupils, so that's encouraged for our pupils to come by bike and by scooter. We have bike and scooter facilities for the children to park them. We are going to be joining the travel club so that children get their badges when they walk to school. We're going to be starting that. We've also been devising and thinking about setting up a committee, so we've now got that arranged, so that there'll be a committee that will have parents from Faunt Street and residents from Faunt Street that are also going to be invited. I myself will be on there, and other governors will be on there to work out ways we can sort out this problem and alleviate it. One of the suggestions has been a kiss and drop service that will drop at the top of Faunt Street, and then we can walk the children down. Because obviously we still want to use that as a pedestrian entrance for our school, because that's where the majority of our children reside, is on that side. And obviously Faunt Street, Doddington Grove would be an entrance where if you had to drive, then you could drop if you absolutely had to. We're going to do newsletters and continue when we actually do our enrolment to our school, is we will continue to have discussions with parents and carers at that point, saying obviously you encourage your child to come and walk to school. If you are from further afield, then please do park further away, or if you have to come by car, then you would have to use Doddington Grove.
Okay, thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. Question for the architect, really. We're a bit dismissive about the so-called wild garden, and I'm wondering, in view of the fact that the council is trying to encourage primary schools to grow their own food, whether you consider the possibility of having even a small area for that purpose.
I'm glad you've asked about the trees and the planting, actually, because there is a planting schedule in the design master statement, so we do have that information in terms of what we're putting back, and definitely we want to put back ecology and trees. So there's 30 trees going back into the Key Stage 1 play space, replacing 20 that were taken down, and these are all kind of 45 to 50 centimetre girth, so there's 5 large ones, then we've got 20, 30 to 35 centimetre girth, and another 5, 20 to 25 centimetre girth. So, you know, we've got a range of trees that we're putting back into the Key Stage 1. We're also, there's one tree there that we're keeping, which is the cedar tree in the middle, which was the pine tree, which was a mistake on our submission. But it was the one tree that the school ideally would like to get rid of, because it's got we're going to prime it and lift it and you know, add it in and try and make it part of our landscaping.
Well, what about a small sort of garden area which the pupils can use?
Planting. that's a, yeah, I mean,
Perhaps that's a question.
especially for Claire, but yeah, we're up for that.
I think maybe Claire and I can both answer that, because I think it's, you know, in terms of school development, we would definitely encourage that. And my experience with schools is they actually like these planting out areas, and it's better actually that architects don't plant in them. We like to leave it to the schools to develop their own. So I would say that's definitely something, if it's not in the scheme, it ought to be part of the scheme to ensure that we get the best use of the space. It's not just for running around, it's also for more passive pursuits.
Absolutely. We have raised beds currently in our wildlife garden, and that's where they've been located. We've actually just moved them, and then we'll move them to other areas of the school, because obviously we do encourage planting. We are part of the Borough Market Group, so we do actually do our planting so that we can make sure children can see where their food comes from and how it grows, etc. So we will be moving our planters to other areas in the school.
Can I just add, I didn't mean to be dismissive of it. I think what I meant to say was...
That's how it came across to me.
I really did.
But it's very sensitive.
I think it's very difficult for the school to manage. They have to take groups of children to that space because it's about safeguarding, not being able to stand back and look. That's why.
Thank you, Nick. Did you have a supplementary? Do you still have a supplementary question?
I did. I had two actually. Thankfully, the tree one has been answered, and the use of that space in planters, which I think is welcome. The other bit was Claire. Oh.
Do you want to put your...
Yeah, no, Claire mentioned, oh, and the kids come from this side. I wasn't quite sure. I'm not familiar with how the kids move and things like that, and where that. How far away do your kids come? What's the catchment area for the school? And we've been talking about, and the other bit which I really regret, or I will regret doing at some stage, I'm sure, exposing my ignorance, which is how many children are we talking about? How many parents are we talking about in terms of subscribing to the school? Because we've been talking about percentages, but I realised I hadn't anything to work the percentage out against when it came to how many people are likely to generate school trips. Plus that relates to, if you are reducing it, where it's coming down from, well, where it is now, where you're aiming it to come from. And also, I wanted to have some idea as to where the children came from, how far they came.
The majority of our children come from the estate, which is the other side from Fort Street. You go up and it's on the left-hand side, so you could also come through Doddington Road, that side. The majority of our children come from that area. And then the sort of Fort Street, not very good, my north side.
Away from Berganza Street.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So the majority of our children come from there, and then some of our other children use the Gaza Street entrance. It's about 50-50 split.
Yeah, got you.
So the other children come in through the Gaza Street entrance, which of course is nearer the tube, and also we have children who come from that area, and then they come round through that side. We do, and then if we have the Donington Grove entrance, that will obviously alleviate Fawn Street already, because we'll then have two entrances from that side of the school.
Right. And how many kids?
At the moment,
How many at the moment?
for 1.5 entries, 315 children. And then it's
350.
15 one time.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
And then it's gone up to a 2-4 entry already, so that's 420 children. So what we're looking at is 500.
600.
Sorry, 600.
So it's currently 315. It's taken, I think, 1 bulge year or 2 bulge years.
Taken 3 bulge years.
Taken 3 bulge years, so that's because the demand is already in the area. And then if it goes up...
So,
yeah, sorry, Jim.
basic capacity, your basic roll is 315, but with the increase, you've taken on 2 or 3 bulge classes, have you? Which has brought it up to, your current roll is 4...
Our current roll is 365 currently.
365.
It's slightly big because it's got our nursery as part of the roll.
And by 2021, approximately, it would be...
And is that when you've got all 3 classes in each year group, right up to year 6?
So each class is 30 children.
Yeah. Up to year 6, and that would be by 2021?
Yes.
You have
and that would be to
a grand total of
630.
6:30.
which is free from entry plus the existing nursery.
And that includes the nursery spaces as well.
The nursery is already there. Well, the nursery is part of there's some nursery places in the new block,
Right.
but it will essentially be 6:30 plus the nursery. And our experience with basically growth, demographic growth, and meeting that at the school places is that what happens is the popular and outstanding schools, the schools that are expanding, actually what happens is the catchment area gets quite small because they're popular. So the expectation would be that the catchment area for the school would probably get smaller as the school grows, simply by virtue of its popularity.
Are you talking about 600 metre circle round? Roughly?
Yes.
And just out of a further sort of question on that note around transport, the parents who currently drop their kids off, use their cars, how far do they travel from? You know, where's their starting point?
Currently, some of our children do come from quite a way away. We do have some children coming from Streatham, etc. So we do actually
Streatham?
Yeah, because they moved or they got removed in their housing, so they have moved into different locations. Some children are coming in from East London because their housing has been relocated. So some children want to stay with us because obviously we keep a stable environment for them. So they do actually commute, bless them, and so get up very early and do come in. So some of our children do come for a long way, which is why some of them do use cars.
And again, it's a question that we could seek clarification from the traffic officer later on in the meeting. But within your proposals, you're suggesting that parents who will need to continue to drive and drop their young ones off, that they do that at the top of the road, or Donington. Do we envisage any sort of congestion there?
Chair, it's a much wider road. It's more suited to cars. Fort Street clearly isn't. And Charles Street, you have parking on either side. So that's why the condition to enforce the traffic up there at the time that the development is occupied is clearly appropriate. And what the head has just said is that the school not only going to accept the condition, they're also going to do their very best to ensure it's enforced. The starting point is actually to say to these 25 parents, look, you cannot drive to school anymore up Charles Street or Fort Street. And I think the intention is that will start from this September, way before the condition takes effect, because we recognise that it is an issue which needs to be addressed as schools grow.
Thank you. And if that is the case, then presumably you will then monitor it and speak to parents if they happen to breach those conditions.
Yeah, absolutely we would do. So then we would have one of our members of staff at the top so that we can make sure that no one drives down. We'll be our premises manager, just to make sure they don't actually drive down.
Right, as it will be supervised. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions to the applicants or members? Leo?
Thank you. I'm not sure if the architect might be able to answer this because you sound like a landscape architect, or am I wrong? Are you with the Hawkins Brown?
I'm with Hawkins
Brown. Oh, right, okay. I was wondering, just for the benefit of the residents, whether you might be able to elaborate a bit more on the experience of going down the northern part of Shaftesbury Street. We have the west elevation images look like they're taken from sort of 50 metres back, with no buildings in between on the west side of Shaftesbury Street. So I thought, just for their benefit, given that you've got kind of nice rounded, you can't see it in that image actually, you've got nice Shaftesbury Street terraces, you have, yeah, you can see a bit of 49, you've got the nice sort of rounded windows and kind of eyebrow lintels and the same with the doors as well, you can't see that. But just in terms of how that experience of the street sort of coming to life as a kind of building presence, whether it's a civic presence worthy of that street.
think what we've done is we've taken precedent so you can see the height of the terrace and the height of our hall.
Sorry,
So we've taken influence from that, and we've looked at kind of the scale of windows and the proportion of windows. I mean, what we didn't want to do is kind of create something pastiche that's not, we don't want to recreate arches around windows, but we're quite interested in how we get the detail within that. So I think what we do up on the street, we've got at low level there's a brick kind of planter which kind of designates, it kind of takes you away from that edge. Then at kind of ground level under the hall there's the kind of bin storage you can see, which we've done in a kind of in a screen, so that kind of looks a bit different. We've textured, so we've kind of got social courses which pick out, you can see on that drawing, which pick out the kind of band at kind of the high and low level of that big window at the top. So we've kind of introduced details by changing the orientation of the brick to try and to get a bit of texture. And we've also put kind of screening around the top because that's where our plant is in terms of the kitchen. So that area at the top is there for a handrail. So we've taken that off and put something in man safe, but we wanted to protect the plant to make sure it doesn't visually impact on it. Then we've got the kind of the glazed element, which is the entrance or the exit for the after school club. So these two elements, we've got the hall block and we've got the classroom block, and the kind of brickwork wraps round into that space. So it almost feels like an inside-outside space in that bit. So it's kind of acting, which we think is going to be quite a good space to be. And like I say, that's actually, I think it will be a kind of different type use spaces for the school. So it's acts as a foyer for the hall. So it would be great for help in terms of when the kids are eating, we need to kind of be in there. So it's going to be quite active in that sense. And then further along, we've got in the classroom block, which you can't see on that image, we've got some windows which have got translucent panelling, because we're quite especially on the left-hand side at the top. So the kind of brickwork wraps up and then goes right over. It's just the same colour in the roof as it is on the wall. There's a step back. What we're not seeing there is the kind of the shunk and shift in the pictures of the roof as well. You see the shadow where the step side on the left-hand side. So we've tried to create interest in that. We're also planting in that space. So we've got some tall trees at quite a reasonable girth. So we get some bloom back in that area, which is something we talked about with the residents, and they were very keen for that to happen, and we want that to happen too, which creates privacy for the school and for the residents.
And the distance from the terrace. Sorry.
Well, at worst case.
The distance from the terraced houses
yeah,
to the part that juts out at the end of the street is
so from 49
20.
It's 2 meters. Sorry, so where it sits out to the other side of the road, so over
the green part at the top.
Across there, it's just over 12 metres actually.
From 49, I mean, just get a sense of the street.
That is a couple of metres between at kind of low level. It's almost like the garden wall at that point. That's only for escape. I think previously they've circulated it as the main entrance. That's not actually the yellow bit, it's the main entrance. That's purely it's escape. And the only, oh sorry, is that what you mean?
No, really. I meant the full distance from. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to sort of draw out the fact that the street's sort of elevation is relatively consistent, and it's not actually blocking out.
It's kind of, I think it's stepping, which is giving us shadows, and I think the roof being, the kind of the changing the pitch. So the one that sticks out is a different pitch than the other one, so you'll get some shadow and movement in that.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Do we have any residents, individuals that live within 100 metres of the proposed site that would like to speak in support? Would you like to come forward? Thank you very much. And introduce yourself.
Sorry, can I subject to my constitutional matter? Does this lady live within 100 metres of the development site?
I do. I've painted it. Oh no, she comes by the bike. We do have other people who do.
What?
She's a.
You can answer this person.
Sorry, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Yes, I do live within 100 metres.
Right, so then you're eligible to speak. Thank you very much. What?
Sorry, I understood that I should come up with I'm a parent governor and speaking in support, but I don't know if this is the right time. Is this just for 100? I'm not 100 metres.
Just for clarification, and just to make sure that we're absolutely transparent, if you could say who you are and give your address, that would be for.
My name is Anne McNeary. I live at Keyworth Street, that is at the junction
of
Harmsworth or Hansworth?
Harmsworth Street.
Harmsworth.
The junction with Font Street.
Harmsworth Street.
I estimate that I live within 66 metres. I paced it out and measured my paces. But I walked, not to the front entrance of the school, but to the corner.
Use one of those wheels.
Yeah, well, I paced it and then I measured my paces in
Right,
the shoes I'm wearing.
And
Go and sit down.
I beg your pardon. Oh, right, I was just about to ask this. Okay, so it's Anne McCleary.
McNeary.
McNeary, just for the record. Thank you very much, Anne. As all presenters have been given, you've got 3 minutes, and 1 minute before you'll be notified to speed up and complete your presentation. You may begin. Thank you.
Oh, all right then. Our parents are very keen on this development. For all of us, the community is really important at the school, and we believe that the community does need all the school places. We understand the issues that the residents have raised, and particularly with the use of the entrances. We don't have a problem with the closing of the new Shasta Street entrance. We originally wanted to use for the Breakfast Club as well, but we understand their concerns, and it will only be used from 5:30 to 6 for the pick-up process, and parents will be told they can't park in Shasta Street. We understand the issue about congestion in Font Street, and we have a plan about that. We first of all did a survey ourselves and discovered that it was 25 cars that regularly make this journey down Font Street. And it's only 25, given that we're talking about 360 children, most of whom walk. We thought we can do something about this. So what we propose to do is set up a Keyworth Travel Committee. We'll have the governors and senior management, staff, parents, and including those who live on Font Street, some of whom are here today. And also we'll ask Font Street residents to take part in that. So far we've got Hannah Jones, one of our governors, has agreed to chair the committee. 2 Font Street family parents are keen to join, as is another bicycle riding parent from further afield. We haven't been able to approach all the Font Street residents that may be interested yet, but we would hope to include those who have been active in the residents' campaign. What would the committee do? Well, you've heard about the Kiss and Drop idea. Well, this is something that the committee could help arrange and could monitor its impact. It could assess the impact of the Doddington Grove Gaza Street entrance substitute during the build, because Gaza Street's being shut for the lorries, so we have to open Doddington Grove to let the people come in from around there. And work on the school's travel plan.
And you've got 1 minute there.
Okay, travel plan to minimise travel to school by car. For example, if for its work the use of Font Street by parents and carers dropping off their children in cars can be stopped, then we can provide the evidence that this planning condition is unnecessary and could be removed before the new building is opened.
Thank you very much. Well done. Do members have any questions for Miss McCleary? McNeary, did you say you were a parent at the school?
I was. My children attended the school. I've lived in there since 1982. My children attended the school, and I've been a governor since 1992 and chair of governor since 1995.
Righto, thank you for that. Chris?
It's a very quick one. I mean, you talked about you did a consultation of the residents and in Font Street, and how many of those are...
I haven't done a consultation.
Said you were going to involve them.
Yes, yes.
And you said you've had some which were involved. Now, how many of those are currently involved in your group?
Well,
and compared to the rest of the residents?
Because we didn't know about this planning condition until 10 days ago, we've only really begun to think about what we're going to do about it. So I have spoken with Font Street parents, and obviously I've had to speak with the school as chair of governors and talked about what we can do about this. So at the moment I've got 2 Font Street parents, I've got a governor chairing this, I have spoken with one of the residents who's been active and who's very keen on this. I need to speak to other people, admittedly, and I will do, and we will make this happen.
Are there any other members who'd like to ask? Nick?
I suspect it's more as a local resident rather than the chair of governors. Are you content with the conditions we've put on in terms of the parking, the amenity, the use of the community use of the school is yet to be decided, and the reinstatement of the mature trees as opposed to saplings? Are you content with the conditions being able to regulate people's behaviour, to mitigate the nuisances that may arise? And secondly, in terms of following Leo's question, and I hope I haven't stolen his question or his thunder, whether the design of the new school actually adds to the street or detracts from it in terms of the urban experience?
So we've got the urban design.
Yep.
My experience of this building, as I've been involved with the planning of it right from July when we first started work on it, is that I think it adds a great deal to the school. It's a modern building. It doesn't look like the terraced houses. I think, given the constraints of cost and given the constraints of what school buildings look like, I think they've done a good job. And I think they've used red brick, for example, because that's what the school board building is made of. And they've used brick rather than concrete or any other material to face it with. The interior, in terms of how the children will experience, is marvellous. I mean, I've seen the mock-ups of it. It's lovely, it's airy, it's light, it's state-of-the-art, and the parents and the children and the teachers and the staff are really keen on that thing. That's the design aspect. I'm going backwards. What was
the other bit was, would you be content that the conditions would mitigate against the possible harms that may occur, particularly around the transport management?
Yeah, I think the transport thing is a problem for us. We acknowledge the nuisance caused at the moment, as much as anything else. The parents cause a nuisance themselves because they get cross with each other and do that hooting and tooting. But it's also a danger to people who spill off the pavements and want, because they're crowded. So it is a good idea to restrict cars, and that's what we want to do with our travel committee, is to work out how we can stop people doing that and offer them alternatives. The community, were you wanting to talk about community use of the hall? Was that?
It was just whether you think there would be whether you think there would be a nuisance from the community hall, given that it will be conditioned following discussions with local residents.
Yeah, we fully accept that it should be conditioned. We have had experience in the past of using school facilities for community use, for parties and things, and it's been a disaster. We don't want to do that again, thank you very much. The only uses that we had for, because it's a sports hall, would be something like badminton clubs and things like that. It would be never our intention for it to be used for parties or social events. And certainly if it was something that the school was doing, like at, when we have the Christmas assemblies and parents come after we always put one on in the evening for parents and carers who are working. But we can use the Thornton Street entrance, just like we do now. We can use the Thornton Street entrance for that. So we don't. The importance of the Shaftesbury Street entrance is the after-school club, so that the staff who are responsible for looking after the children in that can see who's coming to the gate, who's coming to that door, and they can admit them. And then they can be escorted. They'll be able to see them coming onto the premises. They pick up their children. They'll be able to see them leaving the premises. And that's always been our concern. It's a safeguarding issue for children and the sort of whole premises a safety issue for the whole school.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Are there any further questions for Ms McNeary? Right, thank you very much indeed. Introduce yourselves, and then, as I've said previously, you've got 3 minutes, so you dig it out as you please, but a minute to go I'll indicate. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Kerslake, Newington Ward.
I'm Councillor Neil Coyle, and thank you for the extensive deliberations of this item tonight. It's fantastic to be a Labour councillor in Southwark. We have a very progressive council, and the significant investment of more than 100 million into our primary schools across the borough is a real credit to us as a council and to the future of education for our children in this borough. It's also a privilege to be a councillor for such a fantastic school, an outstanding school, and I applaud the work of Anne, Susie and Claire. But you've heard some of the challenges already this evening. The history of this site is quite convoluted, and we seem to have ended up in a position where no one is fully happy with what's before us tonight. Most parties do agree that a north-east extension to the school would be better, and that has come about as a direct result of the impact of transport problems in and around Fawn Street. Now, it might be 25 cars on Fawn Street itself, but 20% of the current students do travel to the school by car. The MLM report, the assessment of transport issues for the council, which reported in December, concluded that there was a significant safety risk to the current volume of traffic and the arrangements around Fawn Street. That's before any extension to the school. The recommendation before you this evening, the condition before you this evening, does not address fully the concerns of MLM or the residents that you heard this evening. It's inconclusive for several reasons. You'd still have teacher access, which could encourage some parents to try and follow teachers into the school. It leaves either the leaves either the school or the council responsible for policing the arrangement suggested. It leaves the school with a reception at Fawn Street, but access via different gates, when we should be reconfiguring the whole site, working in partnership with the school. And it leaves as you've just heard from the Chair of Governors, Anne, the suggestion that the school come back and re-seek access through Fawn Street, as is outlined under paragraph 32 in the report before you this evening. That is in spite of the recommendation that's in the MLM report, which goes much further than the condition you have.
You've got 1 minute left.
The condition you have before you. The MLM report suggested that the Fawn Street access be closed between 8:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. every day. That goes much further than what's before you this evening, and that recommendation came from LBS, London Borough Southwark Highways. So it's very strange that it's not in the full report before you. I'm also particularly concerned, and I know residents share this concern, that this isn't happening in abstract. We already have change to transport and increased traffic as a result of the Northern Line extension, which changes the road access system as a result of changes to the north end of Kennington Park, and means that the Harmsworth Street becomes the main access and exit point for Bishop's House Nursery, which adds additional traffic to Harmsworth Street and Fawn Street. You also have a particular problem before you this evening, in that according to the council's...
Could you quickly sum up?
Sure. According to the
30 seconds.
According to the council's consultation here, only 4 houses on Doddington Grove have been consulted, despite the additional transport you'd be requiring on Doddington Grove, which should be welcomed as part of the broader plan. But none of the main blocks, which go from A down to I in significant numbers of people, have been consulted as part of this particular application. So there is a direct amenity impact, there is a direct transport impact, and none of that is addressed, unfortunately, as a result of tonight's plans. And the residents and I have said already this evening that we do want the school to expand. We do recognise the need for that, but this application sadly doesn't reflect what's needed.
Thank you, Neil.
That's as quick as I can go.
Could you just switch off your microphone for a second? Right, thank you. Do members have any questions to present to ward councillors? I've got Chris followed by David. Chris followed by David.
Thank you, Neil. I just want to ask you a quick question. What would you want to see happening?
Thanks, Chris. I think, come with a really heavy heart to come and sort of not do anything other than massively support a school expansion, because we all know how much our places are needed, and we know what a brilliant, exceptional school it is and how hard Anne and Susie and Claire worked to get to this point on the report. I think our concern is that this is being rushed through, and that
you just heard Anne say, 10 days this suggestion for Doddington Grove has been known to the school. The addendum with the 9 p.m. finish on Shasta Street wasn't even seen by the school until about 5 minutes, after the beginning of this meeting. I think this plan to go to 3 Formentary, the first thing anyone heard of it was less than a year ago. Of course there's a big rush to get these places, and of course that's important. But I'm just worried that, this is a building and a site that will be like this for 20 years, 50 years. And we're rushing it. We could take a little bit more time, have a timely delay, and it's worth remembering that the schools are coming on 30 children each year. Just make sure we get it right, make sure the school's happy and the residents are happy, and that's all we're asking councillors to consider.
Thank you. And if I may share a direct question to you. The point about Doddington Grove is there are very few houses on the same side as the school. But you do then have Arnold, Burns, Collett, Dickens, Edmund, Ford, Garbutt, Harvard, Irving, Jeffson and Keene houses, all down Doddington Grove, who would be affected and should have been consulted as part of this consultation. They have a right to be involved in what could change their use of the roads immediately around their homes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Do you think it would be possible, were we, for example, to defer this application, to come up with a scheme which would meet, not all maybe, but as many of the problems as possible, within a timescale which would allow the school to proceed as soon as possible?
Yes, with the right political will and determination, I think that is absolutely possible to be achieved. But I would add that if it's not possible for this year, then a bold year for one further year to allow the best development of this site that takes into account the full potential, including that, and that might mean that looking at the northeast face. But I appreciate that's not material consideration because of what you've explained already this evening. But I don't think residents or the school are getting the best deal out of what's put before us this evening. That's a shame. I would hope to see that addressed. But as a minimum, many of the issues that have been raised tonight should be addressed before this progresses.
I think the school have indicated that they believe they're getting the best deal, but Nick?
No, just... Yeah, sorry. Just a quick question, and probably I will be chastised for making a non-material point, but it is a question about, you say, yes, there is a political will. Have you spoken, did you ever speak to Mark Williams or Peter John, the people responsible for this, prior to this coming through to the planning process in looking at alternatives, and what was the answer? The next one is I shall leave it there for the time being. I may have another question later.
Yes, absolutely. This has come up in meetings with Peter John, with Vicky at Mills, who's here this evening, with Mark Williams. It was raised as an education item with the broader Labour group. But the time pressure has led to the option that's been put forward to the committee this evening. But that option has been amended massively since December to include changes to Doddington Grove, which should be welcome, but need to be consulted with the residents along Doddington Grove as I've outlined. And there is still time to make sure we get the best, a better deal.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Go ahead, if I may just to address Dave's earlier question. I think I've got a real concern on the school's behalf that they're being told we're going to restrict Doddington Grove and you've got to apply to lift this restriction. Now that if they were given a bit more time, maybe they could.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So sorry, I think Anne's concerns that she just raised about how they would like time to evidence that they can manage Vaughan Street traffic themselves, that they'd like to be able to consider whether they can keep pedestrian access in the mornings and in pick-up time for Vaughan Street, which would currently be prohibited by that condition. I think a little bit more time would allow the school to carry out these investigations rather than having to appeal a planning condition.
You can go ahead with that, Nick. Go ahead.
Just one, I mean, there are two things in there. One is just to, I suppose it's, I mean, I struggle to find a question there, that would you not agree that we do have to look at the planning application that is before us rather than one we wish we had, which has come about as a consequence of all the discussions that you've had, which have, means that we are here today with that. And the other part is would you not agree that if this committee chooses to put those conditions on, it is for the school to respond to that at some later stage in whatever way they choose? We will put the condition on and it can be enforced. So, and we'll be in a position where we're a lot stronger as a local authority in reducing, would you not agree, reducing the nuisance rather than currently where there are no planning conditions at all.
No is the short answer, partly because of the reason we've explained about the MLM report, which outlines significant concerns about the safety of Horns and Harnswood Street as they exist right now. That's before any expansion in the school. The material considerations that I would like you to take into account are protection of amenity and transport impacts. And I do think with a deferral and better consideration, there is time to address those issues.
Are there any further questions from members? No? Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can just remind Eleanor, you'll now need to leave. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Members, do you have any questions for further clarifications that you'd like to pose to officers on any of the points raised thus far from the presentations? Can we just, I've got one, can I just invite an officer to just comment on the MLM report that Councillor Coyle was referring to? Who would like to pick up on that? Is that you, Christian? Thank you.
The MLM report is the transport assessment provided by the applicants. It does state that there are issues with Horton Street at present. I think I've kind of been through those issues and we've got this condition which effectively eliminates the attraction of Horton Street and dissipates that to Dollington, which is a wider road with more parking, and you can enter and exit in a full gear.
Christian, just picking up also around traffic. Mr Doyle, in his objections, raised the point about projected increased numbers in volume of traffic. Have the department done any research around that? And are there any anticipated predictions with the increase of... why am I getting a feedback? Am I speaking too closely? With the increased numbers of students, is there a correlation around that, please? Thank you.
We do expect that I think there will be an increase in car usage, in line with what's proposed existing. There is a travel plan which has another review in 2 years, and we can look for some further robust information again, which the supporter has spoken about the promotion of sustainable modes of travel. Within the travel plan review, we can seek to kind of provide a more robust and a more ambitious shift towards sustainable and public transport modes within that review.
How would you seek to do that?
In the review, we'd state that we would look for them our school travel plan team would set them targets to obtain and use and guide them through methods of which they could do that and which have previously been successful in other school travel plans.
Thank you. Are there any other questions members like to present to officers? I've got Chris. If you'd like to just indicate to which officer. Thank you.
I think it probably won't touch, sorry. I think, we had Deb talking about, policy 3.3 and the SPD checklist. Now, he wasn't happy with that. Now, are you satisfied that, what you did was absolutely according to the plans?
We're satisfied we've consulted the application as a major development, and we're satisfied that we have assessed the application against the 3 strands of sustainability, economic, social and environmental sustainability. So we're satisfied that the recommendation made is sound.
Can I just invite Rob to comment further, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come to this point, that the objector raised about the classification of the application, and it was mentioned that it's been classified as, I think it's been classified as or the reference was made to being classified as other small-scale development. It is rather confusing, members, but the government's classification index for planning applications sets out the categories 7 to 12. There are 41 categories in total. Categories 7 to 12 are small and major developments. Categories 1 to 6 being the largest major developments, and categories 13 to 19 being minor applications. The Council have categorised this proposal as a category 12, which correctly classifies this proposal as a smaller scale major application. Therefore, as I confirmed earlier, this application has been correctly classified and publicised as a major application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any further questions at this juncture to officers? No? Nick?
There was the one thing about conditioning Doddington Road. That's okay.
The Doddington Road issue around short notice?
No.
What was it about?
Conditioning it.
Oh, conditioning it. Yeah.
The entrance actually being named in
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm that is in your gift, members, if you wish to have a condition added to ensure that Doddington Grove is used as an entrance upon first commencement or upon prior to first occupation of these new buildings.
Yeah, I will do that.
Thank you for that. Do members wish to speak on the matter? David?
Thank you, Chair. I think, obviously, everybody concerned seems to acknowledge the need for expanding the school. Perhaps some people think it's a bit early, some people think it's necessary to do it now. It seems that we're almost there in terms of the scheme, and I think it's unfortunate that we are sort of having to make this decision tonight when there are things which have changed since the original consultation, and it seems to me that it would be possible to overcome a lot of the objections and a lot of the problems with a slight delay, and I think it would be for the benefit of everybody if we were to have a slight breathing space in order for some of these things to be taken account of, particularly the consultation about Doddington Grove and so on.
Leah, and then follow. Nick, are you indicating to speak?
I will in a second.
Leo,
the specific objections that have actually come up, I'm very confident that we've actually achieved a lot of the transport and highways problems being resolved, particularly in relation to, when you speak of Doddington Grove and the consultations coming up, upcoming consultation, we can condition that and make that explicit. So that the two main entrances, as is set out very clearly with strong cooperation from the school, be from Gaza Street and from Doddington Grove. In terms of issues of daylight and sunlight and over an enclosure, I feel that all the amenity issues have been very well addressed, and there's been quite effective, intensive resident engagement on this. And actually there's the use of a new community school and a strong new civic presence on the streets. I think there's much to recommend in this application.
Thank you, Leo. Nick?
It's a question of officers in terms of consultation. I've just had a quick look. It looks as if the consultation area is immediate neighbours and people adjoining the site, and that is the extent of it. And I'm right in thinking that that's the extent of the consultation that we have to do on this, plus public notices. So would we have satisfied ourselves that the appropriate consultation has taken place, and that we wouldn't be talking to the residents on the other side of Doddington Road, given that they don't immediately adjoin the site?
Do you feel appropriate consultation has been undertaken? So I think this is where erected immediate neighbours on the Doddington Road entrance were consulted, and indeed press notice was also placed in the local newspaper. So we do feel that appropriate and suitable consultation has been undertaken. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members that would like to speak further on this matter? No. Sorry, just one second.
Thank you, Chair. Before members conclude their deliberations on the application, can I ask members to give their view on one or two of the conditions that have been discussed as part of the debate? There has been mention of the Sharsted Street access being egress only. That's something that needs to be considered in your final decision. And also, as was mentioned a moment ago, there seems to be a desire from members for an additional condition to secure Donington Grove being opened up. What I would also do, members, is just to make clear that condition 17 that's been much discussed, which concerns Fulton Street not being available for pupil access, and also the controls around the access adjacent to Sharsted Street. That condition should be read from the addendum report, where it has been amended rather than from the main agenda, although it sounds as though that condition will be further revised should you decide the Sharsted Street access should be egress only. And the other point I would just mention before you finally conclude is there's a new condition also in the addendum report. It's paragraph 3.5, which is just bringing to your attention the bin store has moved. It is no longer going to be immediately adjacent to number 49, but it will be round the front, and it's just drawing your attention to that fact as well. Thank you, Chair.
So that condition is already there, and that's sort of confirmed. Because it doesn't currently state that in the drawings, does it? But that will be the case. It should we grant the application. The bin stores will be moved.
Yes, Chair. Officer's recommendation to you is that if you are minded to grant permission, that you grant with that condition concerning the revised position for the bin store as in the addendum, and if you could make your views clear, your decision clear in terms of Sharsted Street being egress only. Thank you.
Can I?
And therefore the bin store will be moved away from the nearest resident, which I think is number 49. Is that right? Correct. Thank you. Nick?
Can I propose that those conditions are acceptable? I think personally, I think I've discussed them and their intention during the course of the meeting, and hopefully I've satisfied every requirement to express a view that they are well considered, they're in place, and they go a considerable way to mitigate the harms that have been raised by the objectors and by officers in their reports, and they strengthen the conditions as they are being proposed strengthen what was originally there. Is that okay? Comrade.
Thank you, Nick. You saved me a little job there. Maria, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I entirely agree with the comments of Councillor Howard, but most importantly, I agree fully on the comments of Councillor Neil Coyle, that I think although I don't have any objections to the expansion of the school, I think I would like to propose that we defer.
Thank you. Nick?
Oh, I thought you were...
Yes, but a proposal has been put forward, which is that has to be disposed of before we have any discussion.
Proposals made. I wonder if Mr. Loveday might be able to elaborate a little further on the traffic survey situation on Donington Grove and its ability to actually cater for the increased presence there.
There wasn't a transfer parking survey submitted. However, it's quite clear from site visits which I've done, which have been undertaken there, that Doddington Road is a more suitable road. There is a lot more parking down there. It's wider. Vehicles don't have to turn to get in and out of it. They can go out in a forward gear. It's quite clear that it is a better solution than Font Street. Plus, you've got the access on Braganza Street as well, which dissipates it even further.
And it's 2.5 times wider.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times wider than Ford Street.
Okay, thank you. Now we do have a proposal on the table, so do we have a seconder for that proposal? Righto, okay then, fine. So Councillor Linford Hall is proposing that we defer this particular application for on the grounds of further consultation. Are members happy to go to the vote on that particular proposal? Right, yeah, like that, we don't have a choice there. Okay, so hands up for those in favour. Hands up for those against. I'm afraid that proposal is lost. So we can I therefore propose, with conditions, that we move that we adopt the officer's recommendation as printed in the report and in the addendum that's been presented with us to us this evening. Do I have a seconder? Do I need to say anything else? And the other conditions as discussed. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. And those are the amendment to condition 17, as it appears in the addendum, to secure that the doors and gate on Sharsted Street be for egress only, and an additional condition to secure the opening of the Doddington Road access prior to the first occupation of the new buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Nick, very quickly.
I was just going to second it.
Oh, we have a seconder. Can we have a show of hands in favour of that proposal? And that's carried. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for supporters, objectors, applicants, and indeed for your patience this evening.